What will happen if Ferrari brings their A game for the next few races, and it's the other guy who gets the best out of it instead of Leclerc? Seriously, if Charles Leclerc wants to get anywhere with Lewis Hamilton next year, he needs to have a banger of a season this year. You might be looking at the headline of this video and thinking that this is going to be a negative piece regarding the person who was at one point considered the biggest gamble in Ferrari's history when he got that initial 2019 Ferrari contract. 6 years on, after getting into Formula 1, we have seen flickers of brilliance from Charles Leclerc, and has really established that the gamble that Ferrari made has paid off. It's just a shame it paid off when it did, considering where we are in terms of Formula 1 and its problem with dominance. Commonplace since the turn of the century. Put simply, it's hard for guys like Charles, Lando, Pierre, Alex, Carlos, etc., people who've had junior success and have been touted for World Championship glory, to make any headway against the likes of Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen. It does make you think, had things been different and the 2022 Ferrari, the F175, had been able to sustain a championship campaign throughout the entire season, and Red Bull had not gotten on top of its own reliability issues and its weight issues, Charles Leclerc might have been a proper championship contender. It might have gone down to the wire at Abu Dhabi 2022 between the Monegasque and the Dutchman, and we would have had a thrilling championship throughout all of the year. That was his best opportunity, and it just didn't work out for him. Yes, I know what quote you're about to hurl at me. If, and all that. So, you know what? I'll spare you the trouble.
If, right. If my mom had balls, she would be my dad, so...
There you go. I do think Charles is a great driver, but there's something about his place in Ferrari and Ferrari themselves which has really limited the scope of his achievements, and of course that infamous polls to win conversion statistic. But one thing is for certain. The Tifosi, the fans of Ferrari, the most devoted and dedicated fan base F1's ever seen, is still behind Charles Leclerc. If you go ahead and win the Italian Grand Prix after having won an emotional Belgian Grand Prix, the first time that you've done it in red, yeah, that's a pretty big achievement, and that means that the Ferrari fans will just think you're amazing even if you go to another team, because you gave them glory at their home track. But that love alone might not be enough to really establish his place at the team if Lewis Hamilton comes in and really gives him a hard time, or Leclerc gives him a hard time in return. It's going to be a very important balancing act for Fred Vasseur to address, which I think he might do, but there's still a little bit of wiggle room for uncertainty. Look, I'm not going into the debate about whether or not Lewis Hamilton should have joined Ferrari or not. That's been done to death. No, today's video concerns more on the need for Charles to impress in 2024 and be the leader of the team as they attempt to close the gap to Red Bull, and are looking more able than ever to do so. Whether or not that translates into a proper championship campaign throughout 2024, or it completely fizzles out after this race, that remains to be seen, but it still looks really good on paper for Ferrari to make a little bit more of a concerted effort than they did last year. But there are still some doubts in my mind, and what the editor of Racing News 365 recently said really brought it into perspective for me, and got me thinking, and got me up this ladder to professionally yap to you about for 20 minutes or so. That Charles Leclerc needed to keep up the momentum from China and ensure that Carlos does not outperform him at this pivotal Grand Prix when all of these brand new upgrades, the SF24 2.0, breaks cover. Yesterday I said to you all that I reckon that Charles would do the business here, that he could go to win the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Or, okay, alright, Formula 1 MSC Cruises Gran Premio Formula 1 MSC Gran Premio del Made in Italy dell'Emilia Romagna del Made in Italy MSC Cruises Gran Premio del Made in Italy dell'Emilia Romagna. Close enough. Ferrari still insists that Charles is the guy that they are going to be backing going from this year into the next one. He signed a really long contract, and even though many say that there's an exit clause come 2027 should things go awry, he is banked in theory to stay in red until 2029 when he approaches his 30s. And what made me also think that he could win this is that he seems confident that the upgrades that they have brought to Imola will suit his preferences, and also has addressed one of his major concerns regarding low-speed corners, something of which Ferrari has struggled with, even though they have been the second fastest car this year so far. And The Imola track does have its fair share of low-speed corners, so if it works here, then it could be a really spicy combination. As well as Red Bull's upgrades not working, it could be tight, but it's interesting. But the Racing News 365 editor did also say that, yes, it's all very well and good if these Ferrari upgrades work, but if they work even more so for Carlos Sainz, who is more determined than ever to prove Ferrari wrong and that he was the wrong guy to sack, then this might mean that people at the higher end of Ferrari might be questioning whether or not they kept the right guy. Look, I make no bones about it, I am a Carlos Sainz fan, and I do think it was unfair that Ferrari dropped him. And I'm also an Oscar Piastri fan, which also made Miami a very, very tricky race to watch because, yeah, that incident was really hard. But nevertheless, I still believe in Charles's position at Ferrari, and that had it been done differently the last few years, then Charles might have seen a championship or two, or at least been a championship contender for longer, or had a few more wins under his belt. I'm proud of him, that he was able to prove everybody wrong back in 2018 when everyone thought it was a complete and utter gamble that Ferrari were banking on and that it might not translate into anything. Lo and behold, next year, not only does he get himself a couple of wins in his first time of asking in Ferrari, then he goes and bests Sebastian Vettel, the four-time world champion who was expected to bring glory to Ferrari but didn't. And this is despite the situation which Ferrari has found itself in, which has become the butt of many jokes amongst the F1 community. But at the same time, Leclerc has also had to deal with a teammate who has been very determined to prove everyone else wrong and not be the Ferrari wingman that the team expected him to be. Yes, 2022, when the car was right behind Charles was easily able to outscore Carlos Sainz. But 2021, 2023, and even this year are proving that Carlos does not take the fight lying down. Those figures do cast doubt on Leclerc, given the fact that he was able to easily outclass Sebastian Vettel when he was around, and he was a four-time world champion, and Carlos isn't, and for the longest time was completely and relatively anonymous, many people even forgetting that he existed, the cameras barely turning around in his direction until he arrived at Ferrari. It's been a very muddied few years, which has made Charles out to be good, but not look capable of mounting a proper title campaign, even though he could do. He just needs the car under him that can give him the confidence, and right now he does have that, and I really hope that he can translate this brand new car into something that could give him a couple more wins this year. He needs it because he's not won since 2022. And okay, I'm being realistic here. It might not translate into an actual world title, but I'd at least like to see him give it a try again, bolster his confidence right before the multiple world champion kicks in, and then Charles can think, well, wait, I've still got this is still my team. I can still do the goods here and give this team the title that they've been expecting of me for the last few years. And if he can keep mounting the pressure on Verstappen all the way through to Abu Dhabi, then a lot of the pressures and doubts of the past will start to fade away and give Charles all the clout he needs to put himself up against his incoming new partner in red. Because I feel like he is nervous because that infamous shaky "Hello, Luis," there could be an understandably obvious amount of anxiety for Leclerc given the fact that this is Lewis Hamilton coming in. But I think there is one thing that could be in Charles Leclerc's favour, and something that Lewis Hamilton might need to learn very quickly and very suddenly. You need to understand that if you drive for Ferrari, you drive for Ferrari, not yourself. Everybody who wears red is working for the collective prosperity of the team itself, instead of individual goals and desires. That singular mantra is probably one of the things that kept Charles Leclerc going, that even though he wasn't able to make the most of his abilities and the car's potential, he at least remembered and reminded himself, checked himself, that even though times were tough and the team would flounder and make silly mistakes in the pit stops especially and with strategies, that he didn't want to let the team down and get overly mad at them. Everyone was working collectively for Ferrari's future and prosperity. So you can't really get overly mad because that doesn't solve anything. It makes the atmosphere all the more awkward. You drive as one unit. You succeed as one and you fail as one. You are not there for your own selfish beliefs and desires. Leclerc gets it. They put a lot of faith in him, and he wants to pay that faith back. When you take Button's comments to heart, you can start to understand why maybe Carlos's place in the team has never looked truly harmonious whilst producing some very outstanding results in the process. Ever since he left Toro Rosso and struck it out on his own, he's always tried to make it clear and justify his position on the F1 grid. And at Ferrari, it's been no different. And of course, he's wanted to prove the team wrong in that he wasn't going to take the role of wingman lying down or even take it seriously at all. He's been driving for his own desires and his own abilities. He's questioned the strategy. He's very much done things his way. And yes, it did result in success at Singapore and gave Ferrari at least a little sampling of success that year, whereas that was an extreme rarity unless your name was Max Verstappen or Sergio Perez. But the point is though, is that I don't think Carlos ever got the full memo about you drive for Ferrari. Ferrari doesn't drive for you. Carlos has always been about showcasing his own talents, and this year, where the team has effectively cast him out, he's doing that even more so. And I feel like as this season continues, that relationship will continue to break down. And I think it's already started because all of those protestations over the radio regarding Piastri, Sainz telling them constantly, please go and tell the FIA to give him a penalty. Tell McLaren that they need to let Piastri through, so that means he can take the place back. So yeah, all of that time on the radio. Yes, I am aware that the world feed does like to cherry pick some of the juiciest samplings of the team radio and that there is more to it. But nevertheless, Carlos had to fight his corner tenaciously to get Ferrari to listen or even lodge a protest, which didn't come. Piastri didn't get the place back, so Carlos had to take matters into his own hands if he wanted to have a chance of getting onto the podium when it looked very clear that Lando was going to win the Grand Prix, because of course, Carl Lando. He probably wanted to be there when Lando got the job done. And it's not the first time when he's been wearing red that he's taken matters into his own hands. I mean, that's what got him his first win in the sport. Yes, Carlos Sainz has wowed audiences with his performances, the Singaporean victory going down as one of the most innovative and most intelligent ways of winning a Grand Prix ever, and his attempts to join Red Bull alongside Max Verstappen after a decade apart is something to commend in terms of his tenacity, but it might not yield anything, and I wouldn't be surprised if Carlos ends up without a seat next year if that Audi plum goes away to somebody else. It does make me think that his own personal goals does mean that the chances of him having a long-term future with Ferrari, even getting that contract extension, were unlikely. And of course, the top trumps debate concerning him and Hamilton doesn't help either, as Lewis outscores him on all fronts. The more I see this frame of mind, the more I see why Sainz's time at Ferrari not being a simple wingman was going to be limited. As for Lewis Hamilton, such a signing from Mercedes is an understandable and amazing coup. And again, Fred versus signing two high-profile Mercedes team members is rubbing salt into Toto's ever-increasingly sized wound. But I do wonder whether or not Lewis Hamilton will subscribe to the idea that you drive for Ferrari and not for yourself, and then maybe follow the same trend of what Carlos Sainz is doing. Lewis Hamilton will be getting into a very strong car with a very strong team with a very strong chance of going for the 2025 world title. If he can put all of that together and he has a chance, he will go for it. And maybe not really think about the team game and where Charles Leclerc's position is, because them signing Lewis Hamilton is somewhat of an indicator that maybe the faith that they put in Charles Leclerc wasn't all that great. I really do hope that Lewis is able to work with the team and that they can provide a really remarkable force alongside Leclerc, because ever since 2017, especially since 2017, Mercedes has been focused around one man, and that was Lewis Hamilton. And yes, of course, you might say, well, Michael Schumacher was the center of Ferrari, but even Michael was aware that Ferrari was bigger than himself. Even when he had his 7th world title, he wanted to do the championship deed with Ferrari. He respected and valued Ferrari's presence within Formula One. And even though he's become a titan of himself, he was still aware that the team was stronger, that he built a strong team around him to carry Ferrari through and well into the future. And for a long time, Ferrari was still relatively competitive, but time did wear it down, and we got to where they were in the 2010s and then the 2020s when they were a shadow of their former self. But you cannot deny that Michael Schumacher's presence and inspiration did pull Ferrari out of the mediocre phase of the 90s where McLaren, Williams and even Benetton were doing better than them. But I'm pretty sure that Fred Vasseur is aware of this, and he's doing his darndest to build a strong team so that not entirely reliant on Lewis Hamilton's abilities. They are going through a massively huge recruitment drive, similar to what Andreas Seidel is doing at Sauber, which will then become Audi. They are buying people left, right and centre from up and down the grid. The Andretti family are doing that as well from the sidelines, and you should really be paying close attention to what they're doing. They are hiring F1 personnel as well, and if they do get their slot at the top table, they could be pretty spicy as well, not just Audi and Ferrari. In the eyes of the Italian team, Lewis Hamilton is probably the last piece of the puzzle, being able to translate all of that good work and all of these brand new hirings down onto the tarmac. That could be really spicy, it could also be really fiery in a bad way. And of course, I am admiring the ambition of Fred Vasseur, as well as the ability to sign all of these great names. I think it's very clear for all concerned that if you've got a strong and competitive Ferrari, it'll do only good for the sport, because Ferrari is Formula 1 and Formula 1 is Ferrari. My only real hope, though, is that this doesn't come at Charles' expense. I don't care about what Ferrari says regarding Charles' status in the team. The fact remains that signing Lewis Hamilton is an indicator that the team's confidence in backing the Monaco driver isn't quite as strong as it was a couple of years ago. Because if you still believed in Charles Leclerc, why would you sign Lewis Hamilton, aside from his obvious capabilities, his clout in terms of general popular culture, and of course the financial benefits that come along with it, and have already manifested itself in the overall value of the Ferrari car company. And I'm also certain that Lewis Hamilton being at the Ferrari Formula 1 team will increase its value to over $5 billion at Mercedes' expense. But don't get me wrong, I don't think Fred Vasseur is stupid. He is more than aware of what Hamilton and Leclerc can do. He has guided them through both of their junior careers, and now them together, he can try and figure out what he can expect from both of them. He's already made it clear that they are starting to work more closely together in the last couple of months, and that he doesn't expect them to be all lovey-dovey with one another and go on holiday together. They don't have to be the best of friends. All they have to do is have a mutual respect for one another, and then everything will be fine. So long as they can work together for Ferrari, that's all he asks of them. And that is a very intelligent and shrewd and pragmatic way of going about things. But there is still the matter of a car. If you give both drivers an incredibly strong car that is not only reliable, but fast, and could easily go for a world title, expect that team dynamic to change completely. If one driver ends up being stronger than the other, then tensions will fray. That kind of stuff we've seen before. Even at Mercedes with Hamilton and Rosberg. It's destroyed friendships. It's destroyed a team's overall health. If you look back to 2007, the dynamic at McLaren on both sides of the garage completely fell apart, and it was all to do with the desires and ambitions and aspirations of both of their drivers, which included a young rookie Lewis Hamilton. What Charles needs to do is not to succumb to this, to be aware, to prepare himself. 2024 could do just that, because this Ferrari looks strong. It looks reliable. The team itself looks strong and capable, with a very firm leader who is quite light-hearted as well, and overall loved by the entire community and the paddock. It's a match made in heaven. Ferrari and Fred. Fredrari. Fred. Red. It's perfect. And I feel like it could all turn out well for Ferrari, and I want it to. Ferrari doing well, it just fits with F1. But this lineup, I don't want it to fall apart. It could turn out to be absolutely brilliant. Lewis Hamilton might be completely relaxed, chill, as per Jenson Button, his former teammate, hopes for. The modern Lewis Hamilton feels more chilled and relaxed, but he's not really had a championship-winning car in the last couple of years, and he could easily revert back to type of where he was at McLaren, where he did expect that team to be right behind him, and if it wasn't, he would start to get a little bit anxious. And the dynamic, as I said, with Ferrari is different to any other team. You drive for Ferrari, you don't drive for yourself. Lewis has to play the team game here, and not just for his own ambitions of getting that 8th world title. But I do believe that he is a lot more mature than he used to be, and that he will understand what Ferrari is all about, considering he owns quite a few Ferraris, he admires Ferrari, he's always dreamt of driving for Ferrari, so at least there's got to be some sense of understanding about what he is expected to do for them. But of course, there could be some pushback from Charles himself, as Button again says. He speaks Italian fluently, he already knows the team, everyone likes him there, everyone respects him, and he could easily isolate Lewis and undermine his achievements and restrict his efforts and sort of divide the garage. I would hope not, and that Fred would easily curtail any of that sort of behaviour, that he wouldn't tolerate that sort of thing, and remind people of what Andrea Stella reminds Norris and Piastri at McLaren, is that you drive for that team, the team comes first, not one single driver, no matter how many world titles they have. It could easily work out great. It could be absolutely strong and brilliant. The best lineup since, well, Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, honestly, in recent years. But there is still that level of uncertainty, and it all comes to a point at this next race. Charles Leclerc needs to make the most of these upgrades and consistently outdo his teammate, the outgoing Carlos Sainz, who has nothing left to lose and will pretty much do anything he can to outscore Charles Leclerc like he did in 2021 and nearly did last year. Why does he need to play the team game anymore? He can just go for himself. He's promoting himself to Red Bull, to any other team that might have him. So now, Charles Leclerc needs to undermine all of that himself and just stamp his authority once and for all that, hey, I am still the front man here, and even if Lewis Hamilton comes along, I'm still right there. Do not forget me. Well, if you can do that, Charles, we will certainly not forget you. But if Carlos does best him when these upgrades break cover and the Spaniard continues to challenge his teammate and compromise his own 2024 mission, then next year will get all the more cloudy in terms of prospects for Leclerc, and a rivalry could ensue come next year, which not even Fred's calm hand could temper. Another rivalry that could change completely is the seemingly imposed rivalry between Mercedes and Aston Martin. If Aston Martin's important upgrades, these are major ones, don't work, then VCarb and Haas could easily catch up with them and give them some pause for thought in them keeping 5th place in the Constructors. Many more of my thoughts about the Green Team's future in F1 could be found here in this video that you can watch right now. Or you can join the debate over on my Patreon, as these fine fellows have already done. I hope to see you there.